Hello and welcome to the Small Business Sewing Podcast. Join host Cathleen, that's me, from Sunny Mountain Patterns, and Branalyn from Dailey Sews and Stuff, and guest experts as we discuss how to run successful sewing businesses, innovations in sewing, and ways to make more money doing what you love.
Today we're covering a topic that's really important to both of us, and it's how do you get stuff done with your kids around? And what sort of tips and tricks do you have to make it a little bit less stressful to have your kids involved in your sewing room and in your business? So I have a story about when my kids were in the craft room with me, and I was kind of watching them out of the corner of my eye. They were coloring on paper. It was fine. I was really focused on getting done what I was working on. And all of a sudden I turn around and all three of my children, at the time they were about 18 months, 2.5, and 4, they had stripped down to their diapers and underwears, coloring on each other with markers. And my son, very proud.
Permanent markers?
Oh, thank goodness, no. But my girls are so pale that it still stayed on their skin for like 3 days. And not just on their bodies, but on their face, on their hands, everywhere. And my son was so proud. He was like, look, I made this one into a unicorn and I made this one into a puppy dog. And oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's probably the funniest and the worst story, but there's all sorts of things that my kids get into when they're in my craft room. And I have stuff set aside for them to do, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but somehow they still always seem to find the most, inopportune thing to do while I'm trying to focus the most on something else. What about you, Kathleen?
Oh yeah, my toddler has figured out how to climb up onto a little step stool or whatever. He knows how to use step stools now and loves to press buttons on the sewing machine because it makes a beep.
Oh no.
So he's always changing my settings while I'm sewing, and it's frightening because I don't want him to put his hand near where the needle is, or if I'm using my serger to get by the knife. So definitely anybody who works from home that has kids or pets needs to figure out how to do anything, how to get things done with these little tiny
and
cute
be safe.
distractions.
Yeah,
and be safe.
So that's what our topic is today, really. Like, how do we get things done with all these little, very cute, but very much distractions around?
Right. So that really affects your productivity. And if you're sewing for your business, that affects your bottom line and affects how much time you can spend with your kids, because now you're having to spend longer to do the same production or redoing work because you got distracted or something happened and you did something incorrectly. If you're sewing
you took double the seam allowance or something.
Correct. Or you sew something inside out, which I did.
Oh,
and then I
sewed the sleeve to the neck hole.
Oh yeah. No, people are shaped that way, of course. So, that's all rework, or you've lost that fabric already. And you have to decide, is it worth your time to rework all of that or just scrap it and start over again? But that's your time, and that's more product and fabric you're wasting, which is, of course, money, that's the nature of the business is you are trying to make money for doing something you love, but you still, again, need to make money. Okay. So,
and I think those of us who are doing it with our kids around are doing it because we want to be able to spend time with our kids. We want to be able to share our hobby or our business with our kids. But at the same time, that balance of how do we share it with them without being totally derailed by them, that's the balance that's sometimes hard to find.
Correct. So if you have them with you when you're sewing, there's got to be some way to deal with it. So let's talk about the options we came up with, and then talk about the options that were suggested from some of the business sewing groups we're part of.
Option 1 is the most obvious. We simply wrote don't.
Which is not the point. The point is to involve them and to spend more time with them. So maybe that's not the best option.
But sometimes it is. I mean, sometimes if you can put your nose to the grindstone and get something done in an hour, it would take you 3 hours to do with your kids, then sometimes that is the best option.
Right. So
Yeah.
when you have time by yourself, or where they're with somebody else, or they're being cared for by somebody else, that's when you start banging things out. We're going to get into other episodes. We're talking about methods for making it, more effective sewing or faster
Mhm.
production techniques. So that's when you want to apply those.
Right. And so some of the options for making the don't work, you can hire somebody like a mother's helper who might be too young to leave your kids with totally alone. But if you're there in your sewing room and they're in the backyard playing with them or in the living room playing with them, they can keep them entertained and they can keep them from doing something totally unsafe, but you might not feel comfortable leaving them completely alone with them.
Right. For like a
So that might
younger, like a teenage high
right,
school
like a
babysitter
young
type thing.
teenager. And those people you're going to be paying less than you would an adult or an older teenager who you would leave totally in charge. So that
Right.
might be a more cost-effective way to getting someone else to help you.
Right. Or live near
Or
your parents,
live near your parents or your grandparents
which we
or
both do.
yes, my grandmother lives next door right now and that's super helpful. Um, but then again, I mean, I don't want to rely on her too much either because she is, there. I don't want to ask her to do too much for her body.
You don't want it to feel like a chore if you're asking a family member to watch them
Right. Right.
regularly.
Right. And you don't want to create a resentment for your business with that either.
Correct. And really, I
Um,
mean, my mom's like getting her revenge on me because she's like, "Oh, your son, that's just that's Catholic classic Kathleen." I'm like, "Oh, great." Like, you're laughing at me, right, Mom?
yeah.
For all those years, I
It's
was a
coming back to bite you now.
hyperactive child.
And my parents still work, and so they are younger and can help a lot more physically, but they also are still working, so they
Right.
don't
So
have as much time.
there's not a lot of options, but some people don't have the
Yes.
option of having family able to watch them at all. So a mother's helper or a younger babysitter that can be at
Mhm.
home while you're working can be a great option. And
Yeah.
honestly, if this is your side business and you have a full-time job, you might have the option of getting dependent care funds or dependent care. I can't remember the word now because I have a brain fart, but it's taken out, at least for where I work, it's taken out pre-tax, so it's tax deductible. And it's
Right.
for
To pay for
my
childcare.
right to pay for childcare while you're working.
Mhm.
So it may or may not apply because, of course, that might be working as in working at your job that's you're putting the money from. But if you have a small business and this is your business can help pay for that, you might want to look into that. Of course, you need to consult your competent tax attorney or public account or certified public accountant. Like, don't trust us.
Right. But my background is in childcare, and from a childcare perspective, if you're paying for the monthly tuition, you're paying for that monthly tuition no matter how much your child is at the center. So if
Right.
your business is paying that monthly tuition,
That's
then
already
it's
probably.
art. So if, I hate to say like leave your kids there an hour longer because a lot of working moms are like ready to get their kids at the end of the day. And I totally get that whenever
I
for
was
a little
not.
while,
I'm a
for a
horrible
little while when I was
mother.
working,
I
for a
was
little while when I was
like,
working, I
nope,
was always
I
like,
paid
okay,
for.
I've been away. I want to go get them. But,
Really, I'm like, nope, I paid for the entire time. We're staying until 5:30. I also
but
worked
that
until like 5:30 anyway, so
now that they're only part-time in care, I'm more like that. I'm like, nope, you're staying every
I need to
second that
get
I'm
stuff
paying
done.
for. Yeah.
That's true. Like, I need to get my money's worth out. Yeah, you
Yeah.
want to spend time with them, but at the same time, you need to get stuff done.
But if there
So
is an hour after work where you could, after your 9 to 5 job, that you could fit in a little bit of business before you went and pick them up, that might be another good option. I wanted to cover one more of my favorite don't options is to utilize sleeping times.
oh, yeah, that's the thing
So,
that we have it down there on the
oh,
basically
do we have that
whenever
listed
they're
even separately?
unconscious. Yes. Because that's a huge one. That's like one of the
Yeah.
number one responses we got.
Yeah, and that's what I do for the most part. Nap times. My oldest doesn't take a nap anymore, but my two girls do, and I can usually find something else for him to do. Or honestly, he's 6 now, and he's not so bad to have in the sewing room anymore. He
Right. So
can
he's
be
not gonna go
trusted to do some
eat
things.
things or shove them in your mouth or
Right.
shove them in a outlet.
Right.
We still got kids that age that are doing
Yeah,
that.
well, yes. So my others are also 3 and 4, and the 3-year-old is still very much in a stage where she would do things like that. In fact,
They call it.
she dumped all my pins out the other day, and we're still finding them. I have a magnet. I have a
Oh,
magnet,
and you have a
and we are
magnet. For the
still
longest time,
finding.
I didn't have a magnet. By the way, that's a hint. get one of those
Yes.
magnet bowls for your pins, because you can just throw them in. You don't have to worry about them falling off on the ground where you got to pick it up before the baby gets it. If you drop any, which I do all the time, you can use the magnet to pick it up. It's super fast.
But the problem is, like,
It's
she
not perfect.
spread them so far that we
Yeah.
keep thinking we've covered it all, and
Three-year-old notwithstanding.
yeah, exactly.
It's way
So,
faster than trying to dig out every little thing out of a bin or a little box. It's also a bigger
yes.
surface area. Usually, most people have tiny things or pin cushions. Like pin cushions, you have to be pretty accurate. Although I heard pin
Oh,
cushions, if you use it, it sharpens it. Anyway, the don't is pretty much it. It's pretty
yeah,
easy to
I mean,
understand.
that's
What
the
about
best option, but that's not
let's
always
let's go
actually
to
an
another
option.
option, right? Let's go to an option that people can actually do, like distract them. That was our next
Yes.
one.
So one of my things is in our old house, I had a craft room that had doors and they had locks on them, and I could make sure that the kids were only in there when I was in there, which big plus,
Right, because
but
they're not messing up your
that's
projects
that's not an
or
option
your
currently, but
projector.
that's a whole separate subject. But I made sure that there were toys in there that they only got to play with when they were in the craft room with. And so those toys stayed new, they stayed fresh. They were, not the same toys they were playing with all the time. And it really helped them be excited to play with those toys and less excited about what I was doing versus if it was just the toys they were always playing. If your kids are often with you, another thing you can do is trade out the toys. You can just put some away for a little while and then
Oh
bring
yeah,
them back out. And I do
we
that.
have a little box, and now our kid
Mhm.
figured out where it is. So he like pulls
Of
open
course, yeah.
the dresser drawers in our closet, climbs up to get it. We're like, oh my god!
With our
You can do this
playroom
with
toys.
you can do this with a dog too, by the way. I mean, but it could be the same toy from like yesterday, and they'd be all excited to
Yes.
see it anyway.
Yeah.
Which is the great thing about dogs. My problem is with my dog, and this is not child related at all. Is I have a basset hound, and he
Mhm.
sheds. I do not know how he is not bald. But when he was in the house, he was like, I would just have everything covered in fur, and and he's a tricolor mix. So I would have, it doesn't matter what fabric you have, it's always got
There
something
would always
showing
show.
because it's
Yes.
black, light brown, and white. So it's
Yeah.
always showing. So that's something you might need to do if you have a pet, is keep them separated from your sewing area, especially if you're sewing to sell to customers, because you don't know if they're allergic to cats or
Yeah.
dogs or
Allergies are a
guinea
big
pigs
deal.
or whatever type of pet. Maybe if you have a snake, that's fine. You might need to keep them out of your sewing area to keep it off your fabric. I mean, I've got some really nice wool, which I don't need in Hawaii now. But from, oh gosh, it's probably like 5 years old. I still have fur on it, if you
We
can.
currently only have a fish.
Oh,
We
yeah, I don't think very many people are allergic to contact with a fish. I mean, maybe
No,
eating the fish, but please
yeah.
don't eat
Yeah.
Branalyn's pet fish.
It wouldn't make much of a meal. It's pretty tiny.
Is it a goldfish?
It's a beta.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. They have those
So
pretty fins.
yeah, he is very pretty. My son has named him Fishy. It was very creative.
Oh, maybe you can use your fish to help distract the kids.
I
Like, oh,
mean,
you need to put a show on for Fishy.
yeah, well, Fishy's in the craft room right now, so it doesn't work too great.
But other things you can do to distract them, some of the suggestions from the Facebook groups that we polled, which I'm getting ahead of our topic, is sensory bins or an activity table in the sewing area. I find though
Yeah,
that
so
it depends on the temperament of the kid.
right. So from a child development perspective, sensory bins are amazing. They're really good for fine motor development. They're really good for just exposing kids to different textures and developing that touch and everything. So I mean, big plus there. Great for pre-writing stuff, especially if you give them tweezers and things to use. Love the idea of sensory bins. I use
But
them with my
I'm
kids.
hearing a but coming.
But oh, there's a big old but. Yes. But I cannot leave my kids alone with a sensory bin.
You're
If I
gonna
am
find
doing that,
sand everywhere.
if I am doing that, I have to be right there with them, or there will be water beads. And this is also a true story. Although I wasn't sewing when this happened, I wasn't home at all. My husband was in charge.
Oh
I will
no.
find water beads in
Oh
literally
my god.
3 rooms of my house.
Of course, and
Yes, I love sensory bins, but be very careful. But one thing that can help is if you have a kid who has the right temperament, but still can't quite keep it all inside the bucket, which is always the rule, keep it inside the bucket. It just,
get
but
those
one
big
thing that really
sheets.
can help is a really big sheet, or go to the dollar store and get a shower curtain, a really cheap shower curtain. And then that's waterproof and you don't feel bad about throwing it away after a couple of months when it's all ratty.
Because it's gonna get ratty. But
Yeah.
that's for kids that aren't like my kid, who
Yeah.
he was literally, and you all need to know this, of course. He was literally watching something on tablet which is
Mhm.
another option. We'll get to that, while I was sewing yesterday. And he was jumping up and down the entire 2 hours I was sewing. Yes, I had my child on
Yeah.
the tablet for 2 hours. I'm sorry. But he
But
was
he was
jumping up and
moving, he
down.
was
He was
jumping.
moving. And I have, so that if you're going, oh, that's my kid, I'm going to say he's probably sensory bins are not going to work.
No, I mean, not without some very direct supervision, which again, like my middle child, I probably could leave totally alone with the sensory bin and she would love it and be totally fine. And if something spilled out, she would pick it up and put it back in.
Oh, that's great.
Oldest in, my youngest,
No.
no way. No, especially
That's
the
just how it
youngest.
happens.
No way.
But
So
just
if you have a really little one,
yeah, little
if you have a really little one, you can either wall yourself in with a like a playpen kind of gate thing, or you can wall them off and give them a special space that is safe for them. If yours is still crawling or just like barely pulling up and walking, that's probably the
fine.
safest choice.
Right, because even if they're hyperactive or they're super, even at
Right.
that age, they can't climb over the gate or push the gate down. So that's a better option. Sometimes I baby wear or used to baby
I
wear
was
when they're
so
smaller.
fixing to say that. Yeah. At
On
that
the
age,
back,
that
if they
was
don't grab your hair. If they
oh
grab
well,
your hair,
no.
forget it.
No, even if they grab your hair, it's still the best place to do it. You can put your hair in a ridiculous looking bun on top of your head and you don't look fashionable at all, but they can't get to it. So
Hey, in Hawaii, that's fashion. They call it the
there you go.
bun. I'm so sorry if you're from Hawaii, you know what I mean. Can baby wear? We didn't even put that in our notes. But baby
No, but
wear,
that
if your
I
kid's
loved
small
doing
enough,
that.
I think
Yeah.
up until basically the point that they're not, that you can carry them
Yeah.
comfortably. You just have
Right.
to make sure your sewing chair does
Well,
not have a back on it. You'll squish them.
oh well, see, I'm small enough that I can sit far enough forward on the chair and it'll still work with a baby on my back.
Oh
But
yeah, I'm not.
for me, the limit is not necessarily when I can carry them because I still wear my two youngest a lot, but I can't wear them while I'm sewing because now they're big enough that when they jerk and move, it
Oh
jerks
yeah,
and
jerks
moves
and
me.
moves you. That's true
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
the weight or their mass, I should say. This is a different way of keeping them in a separate area. You're really actually just confining them, but in a loving and
yes,
supportive way, not like a
yes.
straitjacket way.
Not like banishing them. Yeah,
But okay, so then if they're older, we can let them help. This is in
mhm.
quotations.
Yes. See the air quotes here.
Yeah, so my 4-year-old helps me. He climbs on top of the table and sits there and watches the thread coming up while I
Hmm.
sew, and then I give him sometimes little things to help with cutting with his own scissors. But I
Hmm.
have to certainly explain to him, look, this is only this thing. You do not cut
Yes.
anything else. I catch you cutting anything else. Oh, if you hear that, that's a bird that just got trapped against my window. my in my laundry area, because we're in Hawaii, we don't actually have a legit laundry room, and it's right outside my office. These birds are stupid.
We got a bird in our house the other day, but that's a whole separate story.
Yeah, it's a whole separate story. But I'm just mentioning it because you probably hear it flopping around, and I don't want to
Yes.
edit that out. But yeah, no, I have to make sure that he knows, and even then, I don't know if he knows that only cut this with these scissors. Don't touch any of my actual scissors. If you see pink scissors, do not use those. Those are my fabric scissors. Those are just for me, not for you.
Yeah. So my 3-year-old, we're working on a lot of fine motor stuff with her, and she really likes my thread snips. And so I will let her, while I am sitting at my sewing table, I'll let her sit kind of next to me at the sewing table, and she can use the thread snips to snip anything that's in my serger bin and the
Oh yeah, the extra
place where the
scraps have
cast
been cut
offs
off.
go.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah, yeah. So
And
she can cut
it's
anything
thin,
in
so it
there
should
with
be.
my thread snips. And
You have to monitor her, or is she okay
yeah,
with the
well,
steps?
she's okay with it if I'm there enough that I can see her out of the corner of my eye. But if I get up and walk away from the table, I take them
Forget
away
it.
from her. Yeah.
Right.
But
I
it's
can't trust
also,
my kid with scissors right now.
she can't reach them. Yeah. She can't reach them if I don't hand them to her.
Yeah, so if you let them help, especially if they're older and they have the temperament
Yeah.
to want to help out,
So, and my
that's a good
6-year-old
option.
likes to help. He likes to push the cut button. Like he watches until I
Oh
finish a
yeah,
seam
yeah,
and then he
mine
pushes
does
the
that too
cut.
on the
Hmm.
Cricut.
Oh no, I mean on the sewing machine to
Oh
cut the thread
yeah.
at the ends.
Oh,
So
mine
when I hit
doesn't
the end of a
work. I
seam,
stopped using it.
oh, that's sad. Um,
It's a secondhand machine I got from my mom because I have 5 machines.
I have 4 and I'm picking one up on Friday, so you know.
Well, I am teaching my 4-year-old how to do a little sewing because
Yeah.
it's good hand like fine motor skills.
Uh-huh.
It's just that definitely is not a way to sew with them with you, because
No,
you
you have to hold.
have to be like right
Yeah.
next to them,
And
because
so,
it could be dangerous.
yeah, my oldest and my youngest both will sit in my lap and, again, see the air quotes, help me feed fabric through. Especially the youngest right now is really into it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a lot of
but it
motion.
takes Yeah, but it takes a lot of, okay, keep your hand over here, keep your hand safe. Okay, you got to move your hand with the fabric. Like
That's more
it's
you're like
definitely
working
not a
long
quick
term.
way of doing it.
You're working long term to have free labor later on when they're teenagers.
Right? Yeah. The 6-year-old is now at a stage where he used to be like that. Now he wants to do it on his own, but
Oh, but
I
not,
can't let him do it on his own.
still not quite
You,
safe.
I mean, I can give him some scraps and let him and
I'm
supervise,
I'm teaching
but
mine how to hand sew with a needle and
yes.
thread.
So
Um,
for Christmas, I got them some hand sewing stuff.
oh, nice. They should like that. And then they can be sewing with you, so they can feel like they're with you, and you can have them where you can nominally supervise them, and then
Right.
they have something that they need to sit down and be quiet and do.
I think though, possibly because it's all three of them, maybe it's better if you only have one. And mine are
Right, right. Siblings
so
are
close in
hard.
age. Mine are 3,
That's
4, and
true.
6 right now. So
Oh
they're
yeah.
like,
Do they fight a
none of
lot?
them is really super independent yet. But so I'll help them get started with something like hand sewing so they can feel like they're doing something with me. And then I turn to go do something else. And like
And they're
5
back.
seconds later, one of them has a problem. And you solve that problem and then you turn back to
Right.
sew and then another one has a problem.
So, I mean, like we're talking about, maybe having a partner, responsible adult watch them while you're
Yeah.
sewing and you're still in the house. So in my case, it's my husband watches them. I still get a lot of requests for things like,
Yes.
and you go, why don't you ask daddy?
He's literally
He's
right
right there. You
there.
walked past him to ask me for a glass of water.
Always.
I have a snack. Well, I used to have a snack shelf until my baby started eating all the snacks. It would have like nuts and
Yeah.
shelf stable things they can eat, like juice pouches and things. I'm not juice pouches. We call them those pureed applesauce pouches with no
Oh, yeah.
sugar. I don't want people to think I'm a horrible parent, but
No,
sometimes
my
it's
kids
almost like
love
the
those
ones.
applesauces.
It's a. You can get the ones with vegetables mixed in. Don't tell them. Don't tell my kids.
Right?
Anyway, so have a partner or somebody else responsible that lives with you. Hopefully, watch them instead of
Yeah.
taking them somewhere else, dropping them off. Like the better option is to have them dropped off with somebody else. But if you don't have that option, have them at home and watching. My husband's home
I
right
mean,
now, so
right now we're recording this in the middle of COVID, and so even if you can normally take them somewhere else,
you
that might
might
not
not
be
be
an
able
option
to.
right now.
Right? That's not an
Okay.
option for us right now. They're both home. My husband's home. He works at a hotel, so all the hotels are closed. So he's just been watching the kids for the last 10 months. I think he's had his entire lifetime supply of being with his kids the last 10 months.
The next option that we thought of, and both of us are a little bit hesitant to say this, but at the same time, I think we probably all do this. We just don't want to be judged for doing it. Screen time.
Yeah, it's okay.
So,
Trust me.
and yeah. And so we can talk about this as TV or as like an iPad or,
Tablet.
whatever tablet kind of thing. In my case, we have one TV and one tablet and 3 kids. So sometimes there's a problem.
We have
And
one
sometimes
TV
I
and
will
one
get
tablet too.
sometimes I will get desperate enough to say, "Here, use my phone." Let me just interject right here. If you don't know about this, Apple products have this thing called the parental guidance mode, where you can triple click the home button and lock them into an app. Learn how to do it if you have it. It's in the settings. We can do another podcast on that if we need to. But it is. I was just kidding about that. But it is awesome. And you lock them into the app. You can keep them from pushing certain areas of the screen,
Buying things.
buying
Because the
things.
problem with
Yes.
going to YouTube is my kid's been going off of the educational things and going to some of those, the ones where the kid unboxes toys and plays with them, and he makes so much money
Yes.
doing it. But oh my gosh, I
Yes.
do not want him watching that. I don't want him to pick up the habit of wanting more toys all the time. He already does that enough on his own. And I
Yeah.
think he can buy things off of that. So if you're doing that, make sure you have like a YouTube account that does not have any type of credit card attached to it. What we do is PBS Kids has an app for the
Yes.
tablet. It's excellent.
They actually have like a ton of apps,
Mm-hmm. And they have
and most of
games,
them
and
are
they've
free.
got, oh yeah, and they've got games, and they have streaming shows so he can watch his favorite show, because
Mhm.
his favorite show is only shown like once a day.
Yeah.
And so if he misses it, he gets super upset because he woke up late right now because he doesn't have to go to school.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been a really good resource. And then we don't have cable because it was
No, we don't
$75.
either.
It was $75. We never watch it anyway. So we have PBS. And if you don't have cable, we have 3 PBS channels. That's probably one of our biggest distractors, right? Is screen time. Because
Yes.
even, like I said, even with screen time, my kid's so active. He's jumping around
Mhm.
while he's watching it. And
Yeah.
he talks to me about it, so I try to answer him. And when he was watching Super Y, which is a reading one, he
Mhm.
interacts with it. And so I really like to encourage that and praise him for it. But honestly, it comes down to like the TV nanny.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, from a educational perspective, like, I never count on a TV show or a tablet game or whatever to teach my kids something. But if I can interact with them about what they're watching, that can teach them something. And so sometimes we'll do, my kids really love Daniel Tiger. And it really
Oh yeah,
helped,
he's
if
so
they
cute.
watched Daniel Tiger and there was a song for something, then you apply that song in real life. That actually has. So yeah, screen time is definitely the thing that we probably
Probably
feel
the
the most
number
guilty
most,
about,
but it's also
but
the
it's the
most
most
effective
effective.
when you don't have
Yes.
another person to watch them. You can even have them in the room with you, because if there's some,
Yeah.
the tablet turns off or something, you can assist them really quickly and get them back.
Yeah.
If you have older kids, another option is semi-supervised enclosed play outside. So you can walk them through the window. You can't do this for little ones because they tend to put things in their mouth.
Yeah.
But if you get more active older ones, have them outside where it's enclosed, so they're not running out on the street or nobody's trying to grab them. Huh, somebody would pay me to take them back. But you can
uh,
also watch them, and you can have a window open or something and listen for them.
right.
Might not be an
Yeah.
option if it's wintertime and it's cold outside or it's really rainy,
I
which
mean,
I'm
you
sure
live in
you.
Hawaii and I live in Texas. So,
It's cold in Texas. I knew they had frosts and freezes
I
and
mean, we
and
had 4.5
snowstorms.
inches of snow.
I know. Did everyone freak out?
It was crazy.
Because I was
Oh,
in tech having them outside for a little bit, you probably
right.
won't get a whole lot of, time. It depends on your kid. Some kids can play for hours and some only for, like, 20
Yeah.
minutes and they come back inside.
So, I mean, and it depends on the time of year. So, we do live in Texas and it is usually pretty temperate. And so,
But if
when
it's
it is
hot
super cold, mine won't stay outside for very long.
or
But,
super hot, you have to make sure they
but
don't get
yeah,
overheated.
the super hot times is where they really can't stay out for a long time. And in our old house, again, my craft room overlooked the backyard. And so that was really nice.
What's really the
I,
best is if
yeah,
you're right by a door, so you can
exactly.
quickly go
Right.
outside.
So yeah, and the door was right next to me, so I could leave that
Oh, that's
open or
nice.
or whatever.
And then you just go out really quickly if you need to.
Mhm. Yeah. But in this new house, we're renting a house right now. I don't have a window at all in the sewing area.
We went out for
Uh,
it's been pouring for the last 2 days, and we went out for a walk with his friend lives down the street, and they were just jumping in puddles, and his friend
yes.
had rain boots, and they were just full of water, but
Yes.
him and oh, that should be another option. If you've got a nearby neighbor friend that has a similar age kid, have them play together. So I did that yesterday. I set up in the my carport,
Yeah.
um, and I had a big bouncy house. Well, not big,
Mhm.
big enough to fit in the carport, bouncy house. I got it secondhand. It was worth $150 I paid. And I just set that up and had them come over, and everybody wore masks because it's COVID. But if it's not COVID, don't worry about that. Um, and then they just bounced. His mom was relaxing. I was sewing. It
That
worked
is
out well. I
awesome.
got 2 outfits done,
Yeah, that's amazing.
and they got energy out.
Yeah.
So we didn't even have that on the list, but see if you can set up an area where there's a friend that can come by and play with them while you work. If you can work when they're playing, if they could come into the house, I would have them do that. But right now, no one's visiting
Yeah.
anybody's house really.
Yeah. Oh, that's a
So
great idea. And I didn't even think about that because at our old house, we only had like older kids around us and none really
so
my
it's
kids'
hard.
age. And here we're just here temporarily. I don't even know who lives around us, but yeah.
Maybe you need to find out.
Maybe so.
See if somebody has similar age kids that come
Yeah.
by, or you can. It's a lot easier to come to your house because it's hard to lug your sewing machine and equipment.
Hmm.
I just had a little
Yeah.
cart. I loaded it all up, brought it outside. Took me like 10 minutes to set up, 10 minutes to break down, and
That's a really good idea. I
have
always
them out
think, oh,
for
it'll
two,
take me
three
too long
hours.
to move it. But
How much? What do you need? Like,
I
you
mean, that's a
don't
good
need
point. Yeah.
everything. You just need your
Yeah.
machine, your needles, your scissors, and already cut fabric,
Yeah.
and a table. If you have a sturdy folding table, I actually have a antique or vintage folding sewing table.
Oh, that's cool.
It's the size of a card table, and it's got
Mhm.
metal rims around the outside, and it's solid wood, and it's a little centerpiece that comes out that sadly my machine does not fit in.
Oh, yeah.
But the legs fold, it's all metal. It was beautiful. I don't know if anyone can find this. I got it on Facebook Marketplace
That's really cool.
already, and I use
Mhm.
that as my supplemental area. So when I film
Yeah.
instruction videos, that's what you're seeing. It's that wooden tabletop.
Yeah.
But I can move that all over the place. It's like 5 pounds. So if you can get that set up, you could go outside with your kids. So assuming you have electricity and such. Or if
Yeah.
I've got like finishing things to do, like I need to put snaps or sew on buttons or do embroidery. It's
Yeah.
something easy to put down and pick up. You just make sure that the baby doesn't get a hold of your scissors
Or your snaps.
or snaps or your
Yeah.
stiletto. I'm saying
Oh,
all this because these are things that my baby has grabbed.
yeah.
Um, but speaking of, like, one of the other best things to do besides not having them around when you're sewing is when they're sleeping.
Yes.
So if they're at the age where they're napping, you can go ahead and do it while they're napping. The caveat being, you need to get yourself organized. So you're ready
Yes.
to go as soon as they go unconscious. And
So, what has really helped me with nap time is I bought this thing off Amazon and it was like $60 and I resisted it for a long time because it seemed like a ridiculous amount of money for it. But it's called a hatch. It's a sleep thing. Um, I'm gonna use it at night and at nap time. And so it's got a schedule where automatically at nap time or at bedtime, it turns on with a white noise and with an kind of a orange light. I don't it's basically not a blue light. It's just like a really warm colored light, but it's really faint. And that stays on the whole time that they're supposed to be asleep. And then when it's time for them to wake up, it turns the white noise turns off and the light turns green. And so they know when the light is green, they can get up. Now, I am not saying that this like magically worked. It took weeks of training them. No, your light's not green, go back to bed. No, your light's not green, go back to bed. But now they will stay in their room until the light turns green. So I get 2 hours of nap time every single day, like, which is amazing. And they're not asleep that entire 2 hours, but they'll stay in their room until the light turns green. Now, that might mean that they destroy something in their room. I've thrown away several packages of wipes that have been utterly destroyed, but for the most part, it works out really well. And so my 3 and 4 year old will stay in their room for 2 hours every day and I can get stuff done.
oh, that sounds
The other side of
amazing.
that, though, is like if I spend all that time sewing, then
Nothing
sometimes
else
there's
gets
other stuff
done.
I need. Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe if you're at the point where your business is doing so well that you need more time to sew, you know what? It's okay to get a little help.
Like a
Don't think you have to
housekeeper.
do everything. Housekeeper, have
Mhm.
somebody else help do the dishes. I don't recommend involving your kids in doing the critical chores because it usually is done way worse than you need it to be done.
I
Um,
mean, I look at
you
this the
have
same
them
way you
help.
did earlier with the training. I make my kids help with the chores and it takes way longer, but I am looking at this as in a
It's a
few
long-term
years,
investment.
I can actually give it to, yeah,
Oh yeah,
exactly.
no, no, I've started my kid on chores. Oh my gosh, we're horrible. Some people are like, you're horrible child labor. You know what? You need help. They live there.
Yes.
They
So I
you
tell
need
them,
help. You cannot
you are
let
part
them
of the family.
correct. And you don't want
Uh
them
huh.
becoming adults. And this is totally not a discussion about how to parent, but if you need help, even if you don't have kids and you just got a pet or a spouse, if you need help, get it.
Mm-hmm.
You might if that means you have to get a housekeeper because you're terrible at housekeeping, I'm pointing at me. Get it.
Don't.
I still
Or at
haven't because
me.
I was considering getting one, in March, but that's stopped for now.
Hey, yeah.
But
That's
if
what my
you
husband said for Christmas. He wanted to get a house for me to get a housekeeper to come like once a week. And then we were like, well,
we're
maybe in a few
really
months.
yeah, maybe in a few months. I I've also stopped caring so much about certain things. Like, I don't
Yes.
vacuum all the time.
Yeah.
or make my husband do it.
Yeah.
But you will run into problems where your partner, if they don't want to do it, they might do such a bad job that you just say, forget it and I'll do it. But if you need help to do other things so you can
Mhm.
sew to make money,
Mhm.
then do it. If one of the things that is going around the business world, because I also do financial independence and retire early, the
Mhm.
fire community. If you haven't heard about that, please look it up. Everybody can do it, or everybody can
We
try to
can
do it.
do we should do another episode about I mean, not going deep into it, but about the idea of
Oh yeah, of
that.
course. We have that on the list. Don't worry.
Oh, do we? Good.
Yes. I actually have a friend that is willing to come on to talk about that.
Oh, I remember
Although
that
I
now.
could too,
Yay.
but
Okay.
it's more fun with other people.
It is.
So if you look on the business side and you say, I can make this outfit or this product or this course that can make this much money per hour, and or I can spend this time cleaning instead of paying somebody else to do it. For example, if you can make say $50 an hour doing a course potentially, or working on your business versus paying somebody $25 an hour, and I'm totally pulling that out of thin air. I don't know how
Yeah.
much
Yeah. Yeah.
they're actually paid. But $25 an hour to do something such as help watch your kids or clean the house for you or do your laundry, then why would you do a lower cost item, especially if
Exactly.
you hate doing it anyway, versus
Exactly.
doing a higher production thing that you love doing?
Yes. No, totally agree. And also, if you can live next to your grandmother and she'll come fold your clothes for you, 10 for
Oh,
10 recommend.
or get a clothes folding machine. I'm totally joking because that thing's really expensive.
I
or
want like
or
but have you seen them? They look like just as much trouble to feed the clothes
yeah, so
in
just
as it is to just fold it.
let me propose this. Don't fold your clothes.
Yeah.
Just
So what
stop
I do,
caring.
what I do is
Piles.
I separate it into each kid and I give it to the kid and I let them fold it and
If
all
they
the
don't
air
fold
quotes
it,
around the word fold there and they put it away and that's there,
yep,
done.
when they're old enough to do that. And just don't care. Stop
Right.
caring so much about how that looks. I just
Yeah.
fold my own clothes and everybody
Hmm.
else I sort and I'm like, it's your problem now. My
Yep.
husband, he
My
doesn't even put his
husband
clothes
has
away.
no, my husband has a laundry basket in the closet
He
and
digs
that's where
through
all
it.
his clean clothes go. Hmm. Yep.
Yep. Yep. My husband does
It
that
was in the
too.
bedroom.
It's okay to let things go.
Yes. There's a
Don't stress
sign
yourself
I
out.
feel like there's a sign I feel like I need for my house. I've seen it like on Pinterest and stuff, and it says, "Don't mind the mess. Our standards have lowered with each child."
But really, it's okay.
Yes.
Like I was in a course where this is by the way, this was a very expensive. It was like $5,000 to take the
Hmm.
course, and you have to do research. So where you're putting in
I mean,
quite a
this
bit of
sounds like a
research, a couple of
college
weeks.
level, like,
Oh no, no, not that kind of research. It's for Etsy.
okay,
But it's learning how to find a printables niche. But it's
okay,
a very expensive course because it's a lot of intellectual property. It's a lot of help. It's a very specific technique. It's not just some random like, oh, here's how you do it. Like there's
right.
a lot that goes into it. One of the ladies, she's like, I just don't have the time to research. I'm like, you're single.
Hmm.
You work one job. What
Hmm.
do you? She goes, well, it takes me so much time to clean my house. I'm like, stop cleaning your house. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well, I care. I'm like, oh,
So, I mean, to that point, it's more about setting what your priority is. If it's more important for her to have a clean house than to do this research, then fine, but she's wasted the $5,000 on this course. And for
right.
me, if it's more important that I actually fold my kids' clothes than get something else done, then that's what I spend my time doing. And you pointed out earlier, if you're making more money doing a business thing than you are paying someone else to do it, it only makes business sense to pay someone else to do it and spend your time doing the higher cost item.
Right,
It's
especially if
kind
it's
of the
something
same.
you hate doing anyway.
Yeah, but it's the same thing with your energy too, right? Like,
Mhm.
even if it's not a monetary exchange, if I could spend my energy doing something else that I need to do or want to do or like to do or will eventually help make me money or something like that, why spend that energy on making my kids actually fold their clothes? I mean, it just seems silly to me. And I mean, I don't mean that as in I don't want to train my children to do things the right
Right, but
way,
at some
but
time
it's
you just
about
have to back off a little bit
exactly.
and
Yeah,
save
it's
yourself
about
some
choosing your
sanity.
battles.
Right. Polled 2 or 3 of the business sewing communities and Facebook groups. So here's some of the extra ideas that came out. Overwhelmingly, it was a lot of I do it, I wake up early before they wake up. I do it after they go to sleep or during naps or when they're at daycare or preschool. That's
I think
overwhelmingly the answer.
the most common answer was, I need to know the answer too. Yeah. The second most common. Yeah. The second most common is what you just said. And then something I don't think we quite covered, we sort of talked about, was letting them have things like coloring or finger painting or those like aquadoodle or something like that, that's a little bit more creative. So it feels like they're doing a little bit more of what you're doing, but might not be something they get to do all the time.
Although this cautionary tale, because Branalyn already said about how she had markers everywhere. No, my kid had a crayon and was coloring everywhere. I have crayon all over my wall, and it was red. It was on the baby's back, and it was red crayon, and I was freaking out because I thought he was bleeding everywhere. I'm like, oh, it's crayon. You have to be cautious with that because it could get out of hand.
Or my littlest found my permanent marker stash the other day, and there's now an H on my cutting table, and she tried to blame it. She tried to blame it on one of the other ones. And I was like, no,
they weren't in here.
Yours is the name that starts with H. You are the one who wrote the H.
I'm glad you're practicing writing.
Right?
But only write on pieces of this stack of pieces of paper.
Paper. Yeah. And not with Sharpies.
Right. So
or hidden away.
It's always, even if you give them an activity to do, you have to be careful. I think somebody mentioned finger weaving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't actually know.
Although I feel like that might be, like, your kid has to be old enough to be able to not ask for help every couple seconds doing that.
Right. Or get all caught up in
yes.
in all of that. But it's probably great when they're older. Maybe, I don't know, 7? You have a 7-year-old.
He's 6. He just turned 6.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think he's not quite ready for that. Maybe in about a year.
Again, it depends on the kid.
And then there was this other response that we both think is a bit of a rose-colored glasses response. But it was
total BS. They forgot.
They're like, oh, my kid is 26 or 32 or whatever, and they never were like that. They just always behaved, and
they're just well behaved. Ha!
Yeah,
you forgot.
I think you are looking back with some rose-colored glasses, and you have forgotten what it was like in the trenches.
That's like the ladies that go, "Oh, labor was it wasn't bad."
Yeah. Or their children were all like my middle child, who, if I only had my middle child, I would probably say that in 20 years.
Yeah, however, and you'd be like, I'll have like 20 of these kids. They're great.
Yeah. However, the oldest and the youngest will hopefully, unless I've completely forgotten, not have me saying that in 20 years.
Oh, no. Trust me. My mom has not forgotten anything I've done. I was apparently that child. It is what it is. It's definitely not a podcast about being a parent, but this is a topic that's very hard for a lot of people that sew at home. Those are some of the techniques. What does this mean for you, the listener?
So we touched this point a little bit earlier, but something that's really important is to make sure that you are ready to go. As soon as your kids leave with your husband, or your kids go down for nap, or you come back from dropping them off at childcare, or I'm just, whatever it is. As soon as you get there, you are ready to go. You've got everything organized. You know where your stuff is. You're ready to move forward. And that might be that you even have things like pre-cut and ready just to sew. And I think we'll talk about that in another episode. But Kathleen and I both love to use projectors for sewing to cut things. And
the projector doesn't cut it. That would be awesome if it did.
That would be awesome. We use the projector to project our pattern to cut. And that is actually a really fast way to cut. And I find that I can do that even with my kids in the room. So then later I can set it aside and sew when they're not in the room.
You're not worried about them grabbing the fabric or pulling the pattern off of it. If you use the tissue pattern, you don't have to spend time cutting it. The tiled patterns, when you print it out and all that other nonsense, and cutting out the individual pieces, it is much faster.
And my kids always wanted to help whenever I was cutting out the paper pattern. And I'm like, you can't help with this. Like,
I would give him the scraps and he would cut that. But then I'd have little pieces of paper everywhere that you got to pick up because we don't have a housekeeper.
Yeah.
So organization here is key. If you're having to flop around looking for your pins, you got to look for your scissors and everything while you're sewing because it's covered in fabric. That's going to be a problem. You might want to invest in a storage facility. Like I think Branalyn has a very nice one with all these cubbies. So you can put your fabric up so it's what you're not working on is put away. Put things in bins for your different projects, which I'm sure that if you're doing production sewing, you're already doing. But if you're not, think about that. Have
Yeah.
each project separate out so you have all the things you need together in that bin. That's a industrial engineering
And I
technique.
Yeah, and again, that's a future episode,
Right.
and we'll get more into detail with that,
So
but
come
yeah,
back.
yes, but
Well,
definitely having everything ready to go is a big part of that.
yeah.
Um,
So
and then
going for ready to go to like, let's talk about safety because you still have little kids or your animals, especially if you have cats running around.
well, that's part of being organized, I think, is making sure that your sharp things are where kids aren't going to find them and grab them. Um, I
But
mean,
yet
that's
easy for
hard to
you
do
to
with
access.
pins. I feel like the pins, it's hard to do that because you have to have them right there. You have to have your pin cushion there to, I, even though it's a magnet bowl, I still call it a pin cushion to throw your pins in as you're sewing or, whatever. But having things where it's just not quite so tempting is a really good idea. And I mean, like the Sharpie on the cutting table, even if it's hidden away, it might be found. But
Right.
doing your best to make sure that things are out
The
of reach, out of
disastrous
sight.
things
Yes.
need to
Yeah.
be put away.
Yeah.
I definitely have mine in a little bin that has all of the scissors organized, and then I can just grab the whole thing and put it somewhere when I'm done, and then grab the
Yeah.
whole thing and put it back. Then it's all
Yeah.
organized within reach. Same thing with the pins
And especially think
or
about rotary
drawers.
cutters, because those
Oh
can
yeah,
be really dangerous.
that's
Mine,
why they're heavy.
mine has a lock where I can flip a little switch that's actually kind of hard to flip. And I mean, my kids probably could do it, but they'd have to really try. Where it won't, the blade won't come out when it's flipped to locked.
Right. But if you certainly have kids that are more nimble, you probably want to put things away that you don't want them touching. Put them away in
Yeah.
a drawer or something that you can lock
Hmm. Yeah.
or with a
Or
tackle
like a
box.
toolbox or tackle
Yeah.
box. Yeah.
Yeah. Tackle box. I mean, why do you have to buy why do you have to buy those pink nonsenses that they sell at the fabric stores? You can buy anything with compartments that works for you.
Yeah. My thread is in tackle boxes.
Oh, that's so smart. Mine is just in a drawer. If you need inspiration, they have plenty of things on Instagram where they show pictures of their sewing area, so you can see how they organize it. And the pegboard with the pegs for
Yeah.
the threads is a really big thing.
Yeah.
So it's up on the wall, off
Hmm.
the floor, so your kids aren't getting into the thread, wrapping around their throat and choking themselves.
Yeah.
Folded fabric.
They
It's
People
pretty
also do YouTube
interesting.
videos, YouTube
Yeah.
like tours of their
So
craft room. And
so
I
go
did
ahead and
that
look those
in
up.
my old house. But yeah.
Speaking of organization, you probably want an ironing station where you can turn
Hmm.
off the iron really fast and easily and keep it where the cord's not dangling where the kids can grab it. Even,
I
if
go
you're
so far
right
as I
there.
unplug it.
Right, I do too, because I don't want any doubt when I'm done. If
Yeah.
I'm using it, I have it right there and I have it way set back so the kids can't grab it because I don't want them. That only takes a second for them to grab the cord and pull it down. And even if the
I
iron's
have
not
a
on, it's heavy. I don't do
No, I
iron
don't either.
boards at all. I have my little craft table. I have a pad that I put down and
Mhm.
I need it for filming anyway, but I
Yeah,
put
I
it
use
down
a
there
pressing
and then
board.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have an ironing board,
Mhm.
you don't
Think
need
about
that.
maybe using a
Maybe use
pressing
pressing
board
board.
instead.
I
Yeah.
use an old in those folding diapers, the trifold diapers,
Mhm.
the pre-folds. I use
Yeah.
that. Well, I make little kids clothes, so it's like the perfect size for me. But if you need a bigger because you're doing like dresses or adult size, you probably need a pressing board.
When I started sewing again and getting serious about sewing, I was doing a lot of quilting, and so I needed something a little bit bigger. But my husband just cut. It was actually a mess up, a rectangle and I covered it with
Cut that
batting and
down and
muslin fabric.
oh, okay, yeah. Of
Yeah,
course, that's what's on this thing.
yeah.
Nobody can see it. Why am I pointing at it? It's a podcast.
I know. I was pointing at mine too. Like
Like, oh,
it's
here, look at this
right
little
over there.
thing. Look at it. Look
Yeah.
at it. Sorry, it's podcast. If we ever release a video, you'll be able to see it. What this really means to you is you need to develop habits to keep the area clear, but also to keep it where it's organized so you can immediately get it. So things like
And safe.
keeping the machines from being dangerous or broken. So maintaining your machine, making sure you have a good needle in the place, turning off the machine when you're not using. Like you said, turn off and unplug irons immediately after use. If you have a if you might want to have the extension cord up where you can on the tabletop you can turn it off and unplug without having to bend down and hurt your back. Use magnetic pin holders or a magnetic stick for pins. Set up sewing so you can sew quickly. We're definitely going to talk about that later, techniques of sewing and construction. that make it for it faster. So here's a little tidbit. And doing as much as you can on the flat before you do the side seams or complete the garment makes sewing much faster.
So, in addition to that, having really good lighting so you don't have to strain your eyes when you're trying to see that one black thread on that black piece of fabric that you
Make
need
sure
to grab. Yes.
and actually grab the seam. I've done that
Right?
before.
Um, and something in addition to the magnetic bowl, my husband has a magnet on a stick. It's a really wide rectangle, and he uses it in his shop.
Yeah, because he does
So,
woodworking, right?
and so at the old house, I would just go run out to his shop and grab it. If there was a disaster of the pins, like my 3-year-old did the other day, you can run that along the floor and actually almost like sweeping, but just a little bit off the floor, and it'll pick up anything that's magnetized.
Right.
And so,
Really is, setting age appropriate expectations for your kids
yes, yeah.
for that
So it
for your
might be
sewing
too
area when you're
much.
working.
And it might be too much to ask them to entertain themselves for 3 hours while you sew, but it might be appropriate to ask them to give you 30 minutes. So
Mhm.
making sure that the time limit that you're setting for yourself is appropriate too. And it might be a good idea to, just put a timer on your phone and be like, okay, I'm going to sew for 30 minutes while
And then
they're
I'll take
taking
a
care of
break.
them, while they're doing their thing. And then I'll take a break and interact with them, and then I can come back. And I
That
know I am guilty of like, I just want to like nose to the grindstone, get this done. Once I'm done, then I can go do something else. It drives me crazy to stop in the middle of something. But if you stop and number one, give your body a break, and number two, go interact with the kids and kind of get them re-engaged in something, a lot of
Be
times
a
you end up
lot
getting
happier.
more time to sew than you would have.
That works really well for my kid. I also do this. He's at the age where he needs to start writing. So I say for every line you do of your name for writing, holding,
Mhm.
the 3 point thing, I will give you 5 minutes of break time with me and we'll go do something you want to do.
Yeah.
So there's like
Yeah.
4 lines. So maximum is 20-minute break, but you still get to
Yeah.
spend time with your kid. If you have a cat, you can't do that. But if you have kids, which is
I don't know, can you train a cat to use
to
a
write.
timer? Oh, I meant to use
Okay,
a
if you
timer.
write. Oh, if you write, I would be rich. What?
Go ahead.
So I was gonna say
Oh,
there's some
no.
things we can work with our kids. I think you had made a really good list about boundaries and expectations that you talk about your
Oh,
kids with. This is what I was getting
sorry,
to.
my brain was somewhere totally. Yes. Okay. Right. So making sure that the time you're giving yourself is not too long. You're not asking too much of your kids with the time. But then making sure that you're setting appropriate boundaries. Like I really like to phrase things with a positive spin to it. I will certainly tell my kids no, but if I can tell them what I want them to do, it gives them less loopholes than if I tell them what not to do. So, um, rather than saying, don't
Don't
touch the
touch this.
scissors, which
Oh, but
could
I touched
mean,
them,
let
and
me touch
then
everything else,
yeah,
I'll
I'm
tell
gonna go
them,
touch all the needles.
exactly. I'll say, ask before you touch anything. Or anything that's on this table, you have to ask first, or, whatever it might be. Um, and then, trying to I'm gonna use the word train, although it sounds terrible in my brain, but train them to ask the other adult for help first. And that might just be by, they come and they ask you for some water, and your first response is always, "Did you ask your daddy first?" Or, whoever. And when they say no, then go ask them. And if they say yes, then you stop what you're doing and attend to whatever they're asking.
Right. Or if you're like
And
my kid, he says yes, but he really did not
well, I mean, yeah.
ask. He just knows the answer
I
is yes, and then I'll
usually
get what I want.
I usually ask loud enough that the other adult can hear too, and
Gotcha.
then they can give the response if it's different than
The
what I'm
the
thinking.
actual
Yeah.
response.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I
Um,
agree with your last point about the sewing scissors
yeah, sewing
that we
scissors
haven't
are
mentioned yet.
always off limits. And
That's
like
to
I said, my
everybody.
3-year-old, yeah, right?
No, but
My
don't you
husband,
use my scissors to be cutting no coupon out or
yes.
cutting paper.
Yeah. My 3-year-old, I let use the thread snips, but that's it. Nothing else. None of the other ones, all off
Actually,
limits.
I have sewing scissors that have bite marks on it because my dog got a hold of
No.
it.
Oh, no.
This is way back. I was so mad at him. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, there's always you're gonna hurt yourself. But yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely make sure that they know that sewing scissors are off limits. And if they're too young to understand that, keep it where they cannot access it at all.
Right. Yeah. And then if it's possible, which in this house it's not, in my last house it was, having a door and having a lock on it is amazing for keeping everything safe and keeping your kids safe and making sure that, they don't sneak in to go do something they shouldn't be doing. And at the old house, the lock on the door was one of those that you can get that has a push button combination.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, I didn't have to find a key for it. I could just enter the combination and it would open the door. So,
Very convenient.
um, I mean,
And
those
makes
are
you
a
feel
little bit
like
more,
you're a spy.
right? It's a little more expensive, but if it's something you can afford to do, it is a really, really big help. If it's not, I mean, maybe your kids are small enough that you can like hang the key up really high or something. Mine would
Or just have
totally
a
find the key.
latch that they can't get to, type of thing. That is basically our conclusion. So the best thing you can do is sew when they're not there. If that's not an option, sew when they're sleeping or napping. And if that's not an option, have another responsible adult watch them while you're sewing. They can be at the house. You can get a mother's helper. If you have a pet, that's probably ridiculous to do. But if you have kids, which many of you
But,
do, it's an
some
option.
people, I mean, I live in the country, and so this is not a thing here, but, if you live in a city where you can pay someone to walk your dog, that
Oh
might
yeah,
give you
get a
some
dog
time.
walker, cat walker. I no, I've seen somebody
Is
walking
that a
their
thing?
cat before. Yes, I
Alright.
think kid gets paid hazard pay. But no, you certainly can get help if you need help for
Mhm.
other things. So you can free up your time to do the thing that's going to make you money, or
Right,
the thing that's going to help you expand out and get another stream of income.
right.
So you have our permission. You have Kathleen and Branalyn's permission to get help.
Absolutely. I don't know how
And
much that counts for, but absolutely.
well, trust us. Yes, you can get help as long as it makes financial sense and you're at a point where it's affordable for you.
Right.
And then last option, but probably most commonly used aside from the napping or sleeping idea, is to use screen time. You can use educational videos and use
Or games.
right or educational games and use that parents app where they're locked into it so they can't go buy things or go off and find some videos that are inappropriate or not the type of videos you want your kids to be watching.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'll just re-mention the dependent care fund. If you have that tax advantage account through your employer, if you are regularly employed as well and this is your side hustle, go ahead and look into that and see if that'll help to help pay for a babysitter while you're working, so you can work free up some time, or to help pay for daycare while you're working. But daycare, you can of course do it all week, type of thing, and
Right.
give yourself like an extra hour or two without the kids, so you can work
I
on
mean,
your
it depends on
business.
your schedule, but yeah,
Right.
definitely. So, normally when we have a guest here, we're gonna ask these same 4 questions at the very end. We don't have a guest today, but since this is, a new podcast, we're gonna ask each other the questions, and Kathleen, you can ask me another episode, but I'm gonna ask you for this episode.
Okay,
So,
because I was going to write down
let's
the
wrap up.
questions.
What is your favorite time-saving tip?
It's to sew on the flat. I always sew my shoulder seams, neckline, everything on the flat before I do the final side seams. It saves so much time. It's a lot less finagling.
Mhm. Especially if you can make it work to even do the hem or the sleeves or the
Oh yeah, I
bottom
do
of
the
the
hem
flat.
too. I just leave the last inch and a half on either side open so that when I finish up the side seam, I can roll it over and then just do that little bit and then I'm done.
Yep, yep.
So much faster.
Uh, yeah, definitely. Alright, and that fit very nicely in this episode too. So, next question, how do you price your products? Now, you actually have products, so how do you price your products?
So I actually sell sewing patterns for children.
Mhm.
Um, what I did was that aforementioned Etsy course is I took it and we did a lot of in-depth research into the niches, and I looked at thousands and thousands of listings, and I looked at what pricing the top sellers were pricing it at, and then I figured out where I should fit around there,
Mhm.
and that's how I priced it because my product doesn't require physical inventory, so I'm not having to take
Right.
that into account. And it doesn't require everyone I sell doesn't require me to individually spend time making that. Like if I make it once, which by the way, it's not an instrument, it's somewhat involved and it does take quite a few hours to do. But
Right.
it's not like making a shirt to sell, where every
Right.
time I
Where you have
sell
to
one,
make
I
one
have to
for
make it.
each one.
Right.
Right.
So I don't have those costs to worry about. So my pricing is a little bit different. Mine is just basically what is the going rate for other
Mhm.
similar designers for that niche and that style, and what I can charge for my, and like what I'm willing to take, because I also have to, I do have some expenses to account for. I've got to pay
Right.
for my Illustrator program. I have to pay for Etsy fees. If I ever open up a shop, I've got to pay a Shopify fee if I go with that. So that's how
Right.
I figure out my pricing.
Right. And that makes sense for, what you're selling. And so is there anything that you can automate as far as making patterns? And if there is, what do you automate?
Oh, so I actually have a little on my YouTube channel, which is Sunny Mountain Patterns. I
Mhm.
have a thing on how to use Inkscape, but you can
Mhm.
definitely use a drafting program to do things like making seam allowances. And I use Illustrator. Actually, it's more powerful than Inkscape and
Mhm.
has certain features I need. So I use, it's called Actions, where it's an automated system and it does the same thing over and over again. So I like to use it for copying. And I'm sorry if you hear chirping, it's morning for
I was
me. That a
the
bird just
birds are
loves to come by
yes.
and sit by my window and chirp. But that's what I use to automate. So it makes, if you have an Etsy shop or you're doing anything online, which most people are, and you need to generate listing images, I have badges that I put over my listing image. But what I do is I'm in Photoshop, which you can use Photopea or photopea.com. It's almost a clone. And I think they have actions on there too. And now you can run programs. But I have it where I've got a program. I took a course on Udemy called How to Generate like hundreds of mock-ups. I'll go look it up and put it in the show notes. If we ever figure out how to
Okay.
get show notes out. But it's a program that you run and it automatically takes any photo you have in a file, replaces it into the photo of the Photoshop, and then generates that and saves it as a file. So if you need to put things like badges to say, oh, made with organic cotton or whatever, it'll do that automatically. Which if you're doing one or two, you just might as well do it yourself. But if you're doing like 50 or 60 or batching, it saves so much time to have the program and or have action for Photoshop to do.
Using Etsy itself is kind of an automation because you're allowing them to handle the sales end of it. You have to upload it to Etsy and all of that, but
Correct.
somebody buys it from Etsy. Etsy sends them the download. You don't have to go through and do that.
Right. That's if you're doing digital product. But if you're
Right.
making a physical product, Etsy will send you notification, and then you have to figure out where
Right.
to mail and everything. But that's still also kind of automation because it tells you when you have a sale, what the address is, and the product that you need to send them.
Right. And then how can others find you? You already said that you have a YouTube channel, Sunny Mountain Patterns.
Hmm.
Where can people find you on Etsy and Facebook?
So Etsy, I made a mistake and I made my name too long. So it's actually Sunny Mountain Pattern, just singular, not plural. But on Facebook, I have a Facebook group, which the Facebook group, it's Sewing Sunny Mountain Patterns.
Mhm. And then you're also on Instagram, right?
Oh yeah, also it's Sunny Mountain Patterns. I'm sorry, I forget about that.
I do too. I don't Instagram well.
No. So
So,
speaking of Instagram, let's go to our calls to action.
yes,
Please, if you're listening to this podcast, like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us. It helps the systems know to promote this more for other people that are interested in the same topic. You
mhm,
can join our
and you
Facebook
can
group
it's called the Small Business Sewing Podcast, so we named that the Small Business Sewing Community, and you can talk about this, uh,
episode,
episode thank you.
ask
You could talk about this
questions,
episode there, ask us questions, give us
answer
some more
questions.
suggestions. Yes, give
Oh
us some more
goodness.
suggestions about what to do with our kids while we're sewing, and then we also have a Facebook page called the Small Business Sewing Podcast. So every week, we're going to try to ask you a question that you can go to the Small Business Sewing community and answer. And this week's question is basically what we asked on the other groups and what we've been talking about. What do you do with your kids when you're sewing? Do you have an amazing solution that we haven't thought of? Let us know.
Okay, that's It's Kathleen and Branalyn. Thanks. Okay, bye.
Okay.